Only 3 players have ever finished under par at Shinnecock Hills across 4 modern US Opens. 3. And yet, the USGA just made a change to the 2026 US Open setup that nobody saw coming, one that shocked the 2 best golfers on the planet when they showed up for practice rounds. But before we get to that, you need to understand exactly what kind of place Shinnecock Hills is, because without that context, the update doesn't fully land. Shinnecock Hills Golf Club sits in Southampton, New York, on the far eastern end of Long Island. It plays at 7,440 yards, par 70, and it opened in 1891. It is the only golf course in the world to have hosted US Opens in 3 different centuries, 1896, 1986, 1995, 2004, 2018, and now 2026. The iconic clubhouse, designed by Stanford White of the legendary McKim, Mead & White firm, has stood since 1892, and to this day, it has no air conditioning. It doesn't need any. The Atlantic Ocean to the south and Peconic Bay to the north provide all the ventilation required. The property spans 300 acres total. There are 42 acres of fairway, 8 acres of bunkering, and 100 acres of native rough. The present layout is the product of a major rebuild completed in 1930-31 by architect William Flynn, whose vision was a raw, windswept, heathland-style course, exposed, rugged, and punishing. Over the last 25 years, the club has removed extensive tree growth to restore those long, sweeping views across the property and out to the coastline, recapturing exactly what Flynn envisioned. Now, let's go back through every major championship Shinnecock has hosted, because each one tells you something critical about what we're about to see in 2026. The 1896 US Open was won by James Foulise, a Scotsman who claimed the grand prize of, and this is not a joke, $150, defeating England's Horace Rawlins by 3 strokes. But the most important story of that week had nothing to do with the winner. Before play began, a group of players attempted to petition the exclusion of John Shippen, an African-American, and Oscar Bunn, a native Shinnecock Indian. The petition was denied. Both men competed. Shippen tied for 6th place, his chances derailed by an 11 on the 13th hole. That moment in 1896 remains one of the most significant in the entire history of golf. Fast forward 90 years to 1986. The USGA returned to Shinnecock and the course immediately proved why it belongs on any list of the world's greatest tests. A nor'easter blew across the property in the opening round, with winds approaching 40 miles per hour and intense rain. The average score in round 1 was 75.3. Almost a third of the field shot in the 80s. Jack Nicklaus lost his opening tee shot on the 10th hole. Only one player, Bob Tway, matched par. By Sunday, the weather settled, and Raymond Floyd, then 43 years and 284 days old, played a bogey-free final round to win by 2 strokes. He became the oldest winner in US Open history, a record that would stand until Hale Irwin won at 45 in 1990. 1995 gave us one of the most iconic shots ever struck in major championship golf. Corey Pavin, the second shortest driver in the field that week, stood on the 18th fairway with the championship on the line. He hit a 228-yard 4-wood in a helping right-to-left wind that found the putting surface and came to rest within 5 feet of the hole. NBC analyst Johnny Miller immediately declared it the shot of his life. Pavin won by 2 strokes over Greg Norman, who, in a pattern that defined much of his major championship career, held the 54-hole lead and could not convert. That same week, a 19-year-old Tiger Woods played in his first ever US Open at Shinnecock, and withdrew mid-round on Friday with a wrist injury from the notoriously dense rough. 2004 is the US Open that the USGA would rather forget, and also the one that changed how they prepare courses forever. Miscommunication between the USGA setup team and Shinnecock's maintenance crew led to the greens becoming so severely firm that play was temporarily suspended on Sunday morning because balls would not stop rolling on the par 3 7th hole until additional water was applied. The average score that final day was 78.7. Nobody finished under par on Sunday. Phil Mickelson, who had won the Masters earlier that year, 3-putted the par 3 17th hole from 5 feet and lost by 2 shots. It was his 3rd runner-up finish at a US Open. Into that chaos stepped Retief Goosen, who 1-putted 11 greens in the final round, including 5 of the last 6, to shoot a 71 and win the championship. 2018 brought Brooks Koepka back to Shinnecock to successfully defend his US Open title, joining Ben Hogan and Curtis Strange as the only men ever to win back-to-back US Opens. His 72-hole total of 1 over par 281 was enough for a one-shot victory. And that Sunday, conditions were far more favorable than they had been earlier in the week, with Tommy Fleetwood firing a final round 63, and still losing. That same week, Phil Mickelson provided what might be the most infamous on-course moment in modern major championship history, deliberately raking his ball on a green to prevent it from rolling off the front. he would go on to finish tied for last. Now, here is the update that is generating serious conversation among the game's biggest names heading into 2026. John Bodenhamer, the USGA's chief golf course officer, confirmed that the fairways at Shinnecock this year will average 48 yards wide. To put that in perspective, it's the widest we've been in 50, if not 75, years, Bodenhamer said. The USGA under current CEO Mike Wan has deliberately shifted its philosophy away from narrowing fairways to manufacture difficulty, toward producing what it considers the fairest test possible. The difficulty, they have decided, should come from elsewhere. Rory McIlroy visited Shinnecock ahead of the Memorial Tournament and came away genuinely taken aback by what he saw. Shinnecock looks good. The fairways are very generous. They're more generous than they were in 2018. But the first cut of rough is 5 inches long. So it's like the first cut is maybe 3 paces wide and then it gets into the fescue. So if you miss the fairway even by a yard, you're going to, but you shouldn't. The fairways are very, very generous. So if you miss the fairway, I feel like you deserve a bad lie, McIlroy told reporters. Scottie Scheffler made his very first trip to Shinnecock Hills on Monday, June 12, 2 weeks before the championship. His impression aligned closely with McIlroy's. I hadn't been there prior. That was my first time on property. I was a little surprised at the width of the fairways, but the green complexes there are extremely difficult, and I think that's where the greatest challenge comes from, Scheffler said. And then the warning, the rough, also, was a really good penalty, I think, for the width. Once you start missing fairways out there, you have no chance. Wide fairways, in other words, are not an invitation to relax. They are a different kind of trap. Because where Shinnecock truly separates itself is on the greens, and both men made that abundantly clear. The greens are rolling around 11.2, something like that, and I really don't think they need to get much faster, McIlroy said. I think if they can keep them at that green speed, they can get them firm, and they can use the hole locations that they want to use without having some of the struggles that they have had the last couple of US Opens. The USGA was widely criticized after both 2004 and 2018 for conditions that threatened to make the course unplayable. With the widened fairways shifting the burden onto the greens, they cannot afford another loss of control. Scheffler's assessment was even more blunt. The fairways are generous enough to where it provides you some opportunity, and that way it's just that the green complexes are extraordinarily difficult. And so they can put the pins wherever they want and make the scores as high as they could possibly want them to be. The USGA, he was saying, holds all the cards, and the greens are the deck. 3 holes will be central to the outcome. The 11th, known as Hill Head, is a 157-yard par 3 with the smallest green on the course at just 4,280 square feet, roughly 60% of the average green at Shinnecock. It sits at the highest point on the property, 72 feet above sea level, fully exposed to the wind. Lee Trevino once called it the shortest par 5 in golf. The 14th is a 520-yard par 4, the longest hole relative to par in the entire championship. It played to an average score of 4.74 in 2018, the hardest hole that week, despite playing downhill and generally downwind. A reverse camber fairway that falls from right to left makes it a nightmare for positioning. And the 16th, a 614-yard par 5 lined with 20 bunkers from tee to green, is the hole where Raymond Floyd sealed his 1986 title with a crucial birdie. Now to the 2 men everyone will be watching most closely. Scottie Scheffler enters this week as the world number 1 and the betting favorite at plus 550. He has won the Masters in 2022 and 2024, the PGA Championship in 2025, and the Open Championship in 2025. A US Open title would make him the 7th player in the modern era to complete the career Grand Slam. He has finished in the top 7 in 6 of his last 7 major starts. However, 2026 has been an unusually quiet year, just 1 win from 12 starts, though he has recorded top 3 finishes in half of those events. Rory McIlroy is at plus 1,200. He won the US Open in 2011, his first major, and has since added a PGA Championship, 2 Open Championships, and, most recently, back-to-back Masters titles in 2025 and 2026. A win here would give him 7 major titles, placing him 12th on the all-time list. But the US Open has historically been his weakest major, the most missed cuts, the fewest top 5 finishes. His driving accuracy will be under particular scrutiny, as he ranks just 125th on tour in that category. Beyond the top 2, Jon Rahm sits at plus 1,300, Tommy Fleetwood at plus 2,000, still chasing that Shinnecock redemption after his 2018 final round 63 wasn't enough, and Brooks Koepka at plus 2,500, despite being a 2-time winner at this exact venue. One final layer of context matters heading into this week. The 2026 US Open is taking place under the long shadow of a coming equipment revolution. The USGA and R&A have approved a golf ball rollback that takes effect in 2028 for elite competitions. Under the new testing standard, a ball hit by a robot swinging at 125 miles per hour cannot exceed 317 yards of combined carry and roll. Manufacturers have reported that nearly every premium ball currently on the market would fail this test. The governing bodies estimate that the longest hitters could lose approximately 13 to 15 yards off the tee. But Cameron Young already began testing a prototype Titleist Pro V1X double-dot ball in August 2025 that will conform to the new standards, and it did not reduce his distance. He won the 2026 Players' Championship, hitting his drive on the 18th hole an astonishing 375 yards. That single data point has raised a question that now hangs over the entire rollback debate. What if elite players with certain launch conditions simply don't lose distance? Augusta National Chairman Fred Ridley has publicly declared that failure is not an option. New PGA Tour CEO Brian Rolapp has questioned whether distance is even a problem to begin with, and as Bodenhamer himself said of Shinnecock's greens, there are just golf demons around this place. They come up out of these putting greens in a devilish, wonderful, charming way. The 2026 US Open runs June 18th to 21st at Shinnecock Hills. A field of 156 players, 10,201 entries accepted, one shy of the all-time record. The cut takes the low 60 scorers and ties. And if there's a playoff after 72 holes, it will be a 2-hole aggregate, the format introduced in 2018. Only 3 players have ever finished under par in the modern era at Shinnecock. The widest fairways in 75 years are waiting, and the greens will decide everything.